Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's training. We're going to be talking a little bit today about safe food handling practices, specifically for mobile food pantries. My name is Caitlin. I'm the Health and Nutrition Programs Manager here at the Food Bank. My email address is down at the bottom there. Feel free to reach out to me if you ever have any questions about food safety or anything nutrition related. So we'll start off just going over quickly the types of hazards, so things that could make food unsafe. And those things are usually divided into about three categories. So we have the biological hazards, so things like bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi. There could be physical hazards to food safety, such as like jewelry, little pieces of glass from a jar, different things like that getting into food. And then there's also chemical hazards. So that would be, for example, if a cleaning product leaked onto some food, that could make that food unsafe as well. So those are the three types of hazards to be on the lookout for when we're talking about food safety. And the most important thing when it comes to food safety is having healthy workers. So with that comes clean hands, clean work attire, clean surfaces, and making sure that workers and volunteers at the mobile food pantry are not ill in any way, especially with symptoms like nausea, diarrhea, or vomiting. Now, as simple as it sounds, proper hand washing is probably the most important thing when it comes to food safety and the thing that we have a lot of control over. So, 34% of foodborne illness is actually caused by improper hand washing. So, we can eliminate a lot of risk just by doing this one simple thing really well. So, good hand washing should take about 20 seconds, and the reason why we say that number is that that's about how long it takes to break down the outer membrane of a virus. So if we're washing our hands for less time than that, we're not actually killing the germs on our hands that we're trying to be killing. The areas in red that you see on the screen here are some common trouble areas to pay some extra attention to when hand washing and when to wash your hands. So important times to wash your hands would be, of course, right after using the bathroom, coughing and sneezing, after touching garbage, after eating or drinking, or when changing tasks. And a question I get a lot is what's better, hand washing or hand sanitizer? And the answer to that is hand washing is always a lot better than hand sanitizer. In a perfect world, we would only want to use hand sanitizer after hand washing rather than in place of it. Now, I realize that sometimes when you're out at a mobile food pantry, there might not be easy access to a sink. And of course, in those cases, hand sanitizer is better than nothing. We just want to be making sure that we're using a hand sanitizer that's at least 60% alcohol to make sure that it's the most effective type of hand sanitizer that we could have. Some other things to be aware of in the food packing areas at a mobile food pantry would be to make sure that nobody's eating, drinking, or smoking in those areas, just because those activities can increase the risk of food becoming contaminated. And now we'll touch on a little bit about evaluating food. Now, obviously, the food bank is mainly going to be responsible for the evaluating food piece, but some of these things are still good to keep in mind just in case we did miss something or you came across one of these things when you were, say, packing boxes at the distribution or something like that. If you noticed any of these things going on with a food item, you have full authority to remove that and not distribute it to the client if you're concerned that it's unsafe. So, some things to look out for. One would be cans that are severely dented, especially on the seams, or that are swollen. Of course, we wouldn't want to distribute any glass jars that had chips or cracks. And in that same category with jars would be, for example, a pasta sauce jar that had a pop-up lid where the vacuum seal was already popped. We would not want to distribute that. Any bagged or boxed foods that had stains or tears in the packaging are things we would not want to distribute. Of course, any leaky items or items that have already been opened, we wouldn't want to distribute. And also anything with a missing label just because the ingredients aren't on the item and, there could be allergens that we're not aware of, things like that. So those are all things that you would not want to distribute if you did come across them. And when it comes to produce, the types of produce that you wouldn't want to distribute would be produce that had mold, decay, bad odors, severe bruising, or produce where the skin was no longer intact. So, of course, like I mentioned, those things will mostly be taken care of on the food bank end, but you still might come across it every now and then. So, just good to be aware of. So next thing we'll touch on just briefly is sell by and best by dates. So this is another thing. Of course, the food bank is doing a really good job of monitoring the sell by and best by dates and food safety as far as shelf life and things like that on our end. But you still might get some questions from clients about things like this. So it's good to keep in mind that the food bank does sometimes distribute food that is past the sell by and best by date. And that's because a lot of products are actually still safe to eat beyond those dates, especially if they have been properly stored and the container is still in good condition. A lot of times, the best by and the sell by date are dates that are determined largely by the manufacturer related to quality of the food more so than safety of the food. So it's not necessarily unsafe to eat foods past the best by and sell by date. So we do have a handout on the food bank website that you can access. It's called Is This Food Still Good? And this contains our guidelines that we use internally for determining whether a food is still good. So for example, you can see the first item on the list here is dried beans, and those are actually still safe to eat up to a year past the container date. So if you do get clients asking you questions about this kind of thing, you can refer them to this handout, and you can also kind of explain a little bit about what you just learned here. So again, we'll be monitoring the dates on the packaging, but you still might get some questions about it. So next we'll touch a little bit on potentially hazardous foods. So these are the food groups that are most likely to be contaminated, and that's because they're high moisture, low acidity foods where bacteria can easily grow. So these are things like meat, poultry, dairy and eggs, seafood products, baked potatoes, cooked grains and vegetables, tofu and soy proteins, and then certain cut produce like sliced melons, tomatoes, and greens all fall into this category. So the temperature danger zone is the range of temperatures where bacteria can grow most rapidly. So this especially applies to those potentially hazardous foods that we just looked at the last slide. And the temperature danger zone is the range of temperatures between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And this includes all warm and room temperature. So basically, when things are not in refrigeration, any of these potentially hazardous foods, when they come out of refrigeration into an area that is above 40 or below 140 degrees, they are in the temperature danger zone. So when thinking about the temperature danger zone and those potentially hazardous foods, we always use the 4-hour rule. So the 4-hour rule states that if any of those potentially hazardous foods are held in the temperature danger zone for more than 4 hours, they must be thrown away. And if it's a really hot day in the summer, the time frame on that is even less. So again, of course, our drivers will be on site with you and will help keep an eye on this kind of thing, but something good to keep in mind just for those potentially hazardous foods to be extra safe. And finally, just a few safe food storage tips. So, one really important thing is to store all food at least 6 inches off the ground at all times, whether that's up on a pallet or up on the tables when you're packing. It's important not to set food on the ground. And it's also going to be important to clean and sanitize surfaces that will come into contact with food. So, our drivers will normally have sanitizer and towels to use to sanitize the tables before and after the distribution. But if you ever do need to make your own solution for any reason, you can make a good sanitizing solution by combining bleach and water according to the directions on the package. Or if your container does not have directions on it, you can use a tablespoon of bleach per 1 gallon of warm water to sanitize. All right, and that's everything that we had for today. Again, please use our drivers as a resource for food safety questions as well. When you're out in the field, they'll be there to help out with any questions. And I can also be a resource for you as well. My email was back on that first slide, so feel free to reach out if you do end up with any questions. And thank you for all you do for our communities.